Go for it. I thought I'd wave some calculators around since Tony wasn't bringing any this time. Then I found that Andrew had brought what I'd brought too, and I could have saved myself some time. Anyway, the Series 90 calculators, this size, they're bigger than really handheld. I'll come to that in a moment. It's now, 6 years since I talked about the 35 and brought a few around and people played with them and so on. So today I thought I'd bring these. Also, I can pass them round for people to hold, but not to take away, please.
They're not pocketable, are they? They're not pocket size.
Mark Cracknell used to say that he could get a special suit designed so he could carry. I can't remember which model it was, but in the pockets.
They would go in a poacher's pocket just about.
They would, certainly, yes. Anyway, in 1975, HP introduced this series of calculators, which were truly handheld. You could hold it in your hand and work with it with one hand. In other words, they were much bigger than the original classic series, or the original 35. And they were really lovely, but they were maybe too small. So then in 1976, a year later, HP introduced these, the Topcat series. This was called the Woodstock series. So if this was a bit small, this was a bit big. They're both named after very popular at the time comic strips in America. I don't know whether Woodstock's still running. I don't think Topcat is still running in America anymore. Same plastic, very different from the original plastic that they used. And this plastic is, after 40 or 50 years, beginning to go very distinctly yellow. It was a pale yellow to begin with. I've shown you what the relative sizes are. These are not really handheld. Well, you can just walk down the corridor with one of these, or two, for balance. But they're certainly portable if you hold them in a bag. They're ideal to use on a desktop. They're really big, they're comfortable, they sit there nicely. And in the evening, people would simply pop them in the desk drawer, lock the drawer, go home, and pull them out next day. If you wanted them in a lab or somewhere, they had this metal tag, so you could put a cable through it and lock it up. That's very different from the 35s, where you had to buy a special security cable. When the 35 came in, I was in the second year in physics in this building, and we had a row of them at the front of the lab, so people who wanted to do calculations on the results they'd measured would have to walk up to them, wait in a queue if there were more people wanting them than there were, and they would be standing on a sort of monopod and locked very securely in a crate at the top. This is also very secure. You need to take it apart to get it away. So this really was a very nice extra to it. Okay, the first model was the Scientific 91. It was called the Felix, in other words ACAT, since this was a Topcat series, March 1, 1976. By the time these models had come out, ROM had become cheaper than it was when this was introduced, and they could therefore fit more program code in and give greater accuracy. For example, on the early HP models, 2 to the power 3 did not come out as exactly 8. It was 8 point something. By the time these were here, 2 to the 3 was definitely 8. This 91 had 16 registers. It had linear regression. It was not programmable, and I was going to bring one. Unfortunately, this turns out to be a 92. I can't find my 91. It's somewhere at home. I'll try to bring it next time I'm here. Anyway, here it is. That's what it looked like when it was nice and new. A much paler yellow than this. Not very many keys. Far fewer than the 97. But a nice scientific model. The second model was the 97. It was codenamed Kitty Hawk. That's not really any kind of cat that I can think of. It's the name of the village where the Wright brothers built their Flyer 1 and 2 and 3, and it's related to the name of the 67, which was called the Hawkeye.
I seem to remember, Wlodek, in one of the 67-97 manuals,
Yes.
there's an example which refers to a spaceship, USS Kitty Hawk, and it's clearly intended if you know the code name.
Oh.
I think, Jack obviously came out after me, but I think there's a sort of reference to Kitty Hawk in one of the manuals.
Which manual?
I think it's one of the 67 or 97 manuals. One of the examples they give. The examples in 18 manuals, there are often a lot of jokes in them. I think they sort of use the code name without specifying it was the code name, but those who know it clearly was.
Oh, I love their manuals.
Oh yes.
Okay, so you could use the same magnetic cards as you could on the 67 and on the 97. If you ran a program on the 67, there was a pause instruction which would stop to let you display a result. That same instruction was a print instruction on this, so if you had a program written on one of them and you just read it on the other one, on this one it would print the result, on the other one it would stop and display the result. Very nice printer. It was a thermal printer, which meant the paper was more expensive and it faded, but you didn't have to go around buying ink cartridges all the time. The function set is scientific. It's an extensive function set. There aren't 2 shift keys, instead there are lots and lots and lots of function keys. It was a scientific model. It doesn't say scientific on the front, it just says calculator on that label, but because it was programmable and lots of steps, 260 I think, you could program it to do business calculations too. So HP never brought out a programmable business model in this series. If people want to take one and look at it, or we can pass them around later. The third model was a business model. It was not programmable. It had 2 shift keys. The HP92, it also doesn't say what side of calculator it is, it just says calculator, but this was actually called an investor printing calculator because it had more business functions than many others. You could calculate what your investments were going to do if you had the money to invest at that time. They have a very nice display. It's a big display. Nick Reed, who used to come to us long ago, talked about someone who had a shop and was very bad, had bad sight. They put in one of these semicircular pieces of glass there and enlarged it, and he never parted from his desktop calculator because he could do everything on it and he could see it much better than the smaller ones. I suspect people still want it. It's difficult to buy because calculator collectors are competing with people who want one to use. So okay, thank you very much, Andrew, for bringing batteries so I can turn these on. I've got batteries for some of them, but I never seem to find the time to charge them. They probably don't work anymore. I'll need to have them recreated. Anyway, very nice calculator. What have I done?
Go back one. Left.
Click.
Back one.
Back one.
Left or...
I keep pressing the left key and it keeps going click.
Right key, sorry.
Right key?
I think it's come off the modal.
What's going on there?
I think the focus modal has changed. Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you. What had I done?
Oh, no, don't.
Don't ask. All right. The fourth model was the 97
Oh, which,
with a box like this on it.
Oh,
It
that's
was a very early version of what Mark was showing to us today. You could plug this into a BCD device and take measurements or send instructions. You use the 97S just like a 97, but you could put instructions or numbers into the X register, and there was an instruction to say read or write, and you sent it out or read it back.
Really? It was the same, it was absolutely the same as 97 inside.
So you set a flag, you didn't send an
The
instruction.
only output you have were the 4 flags.
Yes.
The 4 flags of course has 4 pins on that connector. You could not send a number out, or you can, but one of the flags of course was the input flag, flag 3. And at that point you could read in the BCD number, and it was equivalent to typing it on the keyboard. It was exactly equivalent to pressing these in the hardware.
Thank you, Tony.
It was exactly, and it really was absolutely the same electronics as the 97.
Okay. And when you sent an output,
The only way to output was to set and clear the flag. You only had 4 bits output.
Oh right, so the
There was no way
flag
to output
settings
a
were
number.
output, and the input
So you
was...
might set a flag to say take a reading,
Yes.
and then do an input. The flag would then say, okay, I'm ready to have the data sent in. You then read in the digits rather than effectively typing on the keyboard.
Thank you. So you can see I haven't actually used this.
I think there was a way. I think some of the unused BCD combinations, the other 6 states of the 4 lines,
Yes.
were used for things like entering a decimal point or entering an exponent function. I can't remember the details. It's a long time since I've been inside one.
Thank you very much. Did you have one?
I borrowed one of you, Wlodek.
Oh, you borrowed.
I've still got it.
That's right, I had 2 of these as well, yes, and you've still got one.
I've
Okay.
still got one.
Right.
I know where it is, don't worry.
Okay, excellent. That's more than I know about where my 91 is. So.
I'd like to see one of those working. I'd like to see one of those actually working.
Well, one day we should have a demo,
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
If it's exactly the same as a 97, then in theory then we could create a little breadboard that we attach to it in the right places and turn it into a 97 IO.
Yes.
In theory.
The electronics in that interface box, I think there might be a programmed ROM in there to do the conversion between BCD digits and key codes. I'll have to check on that. I've got the circuit diagrams. It is all standard 4000 series CMOS chips. There's nothing HP custom in it. You could make it. And although they did revise the circuit board in the 97 later, the revision was simply to bring out the appropriate connection points to a convenient set of 16 holes on the board.
Oh, so they didn't design it, they designed the electronics, it was just the board?
It was, the electronics are following the same, so the ROMs.
Ah.
It will be possible. It picks up the 2 clock lines, the instruction, IAIS, the data line, things like that from the processor. But essentially, it is the standard. I have seen, I think, a very early 97 inside where the wire simply sold the appropriate points on the board.
Because when they changed the board, they changed the way the serial numbers was numbered.
Didn't it?
There was a different. There was a 9 on it. I'm just checking the serial numbers on these. Some people want to go home, so I should probably fiddle about with number checking at some other stage. Anyway, as Tony said, uses flag settings to toggle things in and out. I was told that they'd redesigned the electronics. Tony says it was only the board.
I don't think they did.
Okay. The board design then was changed in the 97, and the 92 also, I understand, changed the way the models were numbered, the serial numbers were made. So I thought that meant the 92 was also rechanged.
I mean, the circuit boards are different in all the Topcats, the main boards, as far as I know. I don't know any reason why you want to bring that connect up on a 92, but...
No. Alright, maybe they just changed the way they were writing the serial numbers. Okay, now, the missing link. One more Topcat model was designed, but it was never sold, the 95C. They were really very ready to set it out, start selling it. 100 pre-production models were made, and they were sent out to HP labs and to a few select customers who were well known to HP for evaluation. Manuals were printed.
That's what I've rolled 8,000 miles for.
And an applications manual. And if those of you who were at the conference last year, Eric was talking about manuals, and he didn't have this particular one, so I lent him this one, and Mark brought it back from America and gave it back to me today. So the manuals were there, and the application program manual was there, and they had the same kind of jokes as HP used to have in their manuals. It's not very clear when it was due to be introduced, but the date on the front page says January 1977. So it was clearly going to be introduced later than the 97S, 97, which had already been introduced in 1976. Its full name was rather unwieldy, the 95C Scientific Printing Calculator with Partition Programming. They were very proud of this. The program space, and I'll come back to that in a moment, instead of one long program with labels in it, as they'd done on all previous models, you could have 4 separate program spaces. Now, I can't remember the code name for it. Does anyone remember the code name? I think there was a code name for it.
It was a cat as well.
And it was a cat.
Has it got a mag card reader?
No.
No point in the mag card reader. The point is you've got constant memory,
Oh.
so you can turn it off and on again and it's still got there.
Yeah, there's a C.
Instead of saving programs, it had constant memory. So these were saved in memory. HP had recently brought out the 29C, which was constant memory. 25C, sorry, 25C. 29C came a bit later. So they were using constant memory. And so they were using slightly different electronics. As I say, it had 4 program partitions. So in any program you could go to a step. The fairly primitive programming language that they had on these, you could go to. You could have a test and then a go to. But if you wanted to use one of the other program spaces, you could jump to a step in one of the other programs. So this was really rather clever. This is the way the 41 worked and so on.
It's an evolutionary process.
A bit.
I'll talk about this in a bit actually.
Okay.
Because the 41 doesn't really, but I'll talk about it.
It divides program memory up in a different way. It was ready to be introduced, but instead it was cancelled. Now, the reasons given for the cancellation vary, all sorts of things. The general reason seems to have been that it would have been competition for the 97. The 97 was already on sale. It would have been much the same price. And the 97 and the 67 were a great pair to help sell more models. HP would sell one of these and then they would say, well, if you buy one of these too, you can print the results. Alternatively, they'd sell one of these and say, if you buy one of these, you can put it in your pocket. So it increased sales. The 95C didn't have anything that it could do with that, like that. So most of the 100 pre-production units, though I have read somewhere that there were only 50, were returned to HP and they were ordered to be destroyed. A few survived. Mega Shyam, who I don't know if any of you know, he does turn up at HP conferences in the US occasionally, worked at HP, found one odd calculator in the back of a drawer. I think he moved office and there was one in the back of a drawer in the new desk he had. He brought one along to an HPCC meeting. Not an HPCC meeting, one of the HP conferences. There was no front label on the front. It had different keys from other things and he didn't know what he'd brought. However, he thought it was nice to show around, and other people jumped at it and said, hey, that's a 95C, I've never seen one before. And in fact, they were amazed that there was one there. Mega gave it to Dave Hicks's Museum of HP Calculators. If you go to Dave's site, you will see a photograph of that very one without a label on the front. Now, this is the high point of my talk. I've got one with a label on the front.
Really?
Yes. Not only is it a 95C, it's even one with a label on the front.
Oh my goodness. Oh wow. How did you get that?
Long story.
A label printer.
If you look carefully, it's identical to the 92. So of course I just took a 92 and painted keys on it. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. What happened at HP was that people were ordered to return theirs, and then they were all dumped in a skip. Not the same skip. It happened over several weeks. And some people who had worked on these said, why is it sitting in a skip? It's worth saving. And one or two people recovered a few from the skips. Tony is an expert on this, skip diving. Anyway, one person there, Chris Bunsen, had two, because he'd saved two from skips, and he had them in his attic because he didn't know what to do with them. And Eric Smith, who is the guy who produces very good copies of HP calculators, the Brouhaha website, and his partner, I believe it's his partner in programming, not a partner in the modern sense of the word, bought one. And then I turned up and Chris Bunsen said, I might as well sell you the other one because it's sitting unused in my attic. It's now sitting unused in my front room instead, but at least it's being looked at and loved. And so he said that he would sell it to me on condition that if I ever decided I was going to get rid of it, I sell it back to him. However, Chris Bunsen has died. I don't quite know what to do about this now. On the other hand, I'm not planning to sell it. I suspect if I do ever decide I need to sell it, I will have to offer it to Chris Bunsen's sister first, before I offer it to anyone else. However, I don't intend to sell this at all. As I say, it's one with the label. When I turned it on when I got home, it wouldn't work. A few months later, a few years later, I visited Tony. Tony promptly took it apart, took photographs, went upstairs with it and came back down and said it needed transistor changing. I've put the new one in. And it works. Thank you, Tony.
Well done, that was what I pointed out, that if I was charging for the repair, it would be very much 5p for a transistor,
yes,
and £99.95 for knowing which one to change.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Anyway, Tony did find out which one to change and had a spare.
To be fair, I did not put the original part in. It was just a generic NPN crystal. It's a 2M3904 that went in there, which works perfectly well.
So it works beautifully. I am going to leave it here on the desk for people to play with, but please be careful with it. I believe there are 7 others in the world, one without a label.
Don't rub the label off.
Don't take it off. And I'm sure.
The question, I think the answer is no.
You don't have an emulator for it?
Not the 95.
I believe there is one.
Because there's so few in the world.
Yes.
Probably people that have developed the emulators haven't been able to actually get the ROM image.
To check them.
Well, no, to actually to be emulated.
I'm surprised Eric Smith hasn't got the ROM image out of it.
Maybe he has. I don't know.
It would not be that difficult with his. There wasn't any other Topcat.
Is it a discrete chip?
The ROMs are the ROM RAM chips, similar to the. I think it's a ROM 0 and the ROM RAM pairs, similar to all the other Topcats. If you can read out ROMs in a Topcat, say by emulating how the processor accesses ROM, you could do a 95C. And I'm pretty sure Eric Smith can do that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to take the tops off the chips and try to photograph the die, for example. You could do it electrically, because the ROM is discrete from the processor. I would be very surprised if Eric Smith hadn't done that.
I would imagine he would have
it's
gone.
what he does,
Yes.
and such a rare machine he'd want a backup.
I would have thought he'd have gone to Dave Hicks and used his, since they both live on the West Coast. I mean, the West Coast is big, but
I would say if he's got access, I think he'd have done it. Put it that way.
I may decide if I'm ever visiting the US again. I didn't get there this year, to take it with me and
Well, you want to talk
so Eric can do it.
Yeah. The other thing, I must give you a word of warning about the 95.
Yes.
Which is?
If you have a genuine one, as you do, all the Topcat series, the problem with the 29C is if you plug the charger in without the battery pack acts as a voltage regulator. And in most of the calculators, in the one without continuous memory, it's all right because if you have a battery pack and you switch the machine on, we calculate such a low that charger voltage drops. But in the ones with continuous memory, with the machine turned off, the voltage to keep the memory running rises too high to come straight on the charger, and it burns the RAMs out. Now, all Topcats have a circuit added to effectively limit the voltage from the charger, which only works when the machine is switched on. So any of the other Topcats are safe. If you plug the charger in the battery, they will not work properly. They will partly work. Things like printers and card readers won't work, but they won't damage. The 95C, it does not protect continuous memory.
Is that only because that's constant memory?
Yes. Because that's powered all the time, it is not protected. So I want to say, if you are lucky enough to have a 95C, never charge the battery in it. Take the battery pack out and charge in another Topcat.
Really?
Yes. You see,
Thank you.
if the battery pack's defective, it could damage the RAM, and they're part of the custom ROMs, so you never get them.
You never get any more of that.
So
No,
take
no.
the battery pack out, put in say 91 or 97, charge it there, because with that machine turned off, it won't do any damage if the battery pack's defective. It's just a word of warning.
Thank you.
I mean, you know, just...
To the 7 people in the world.
Yes,
have it.
because they're so rare, I can't get the replacement ROM pairs for them. No way.
Okay, thank you.
How many transistors does it have inside?
Or discrete transistors.
Yeah. Well, since you
About 10 of them.
Really?
But of course the fault could be something totally different.
Yeah.
I've got the circuit diagram you want to see. I've got it on my laptop, you want to see the circuit diagram on 95C.
Nigel,
On the HPCC website, actually.
No, I'm just thinking of how we could get an image of the ROM.
Oh, in terms of the ROMs and the chips, the easiest way will be the processor is known, it's the ACT, the synchronous timing chip. How it accesses memory is known. You could effectively simulate what the processor is doing, say using some other piece of logic, an Arduino with SQL interfacing, say, which would actually pretend to be the processor and simply read the ROM code out. I mean, that's the easiest way to do it. It's been done for most of the other machines that way.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see an emulator for this. It would be
I
really
think
nice to
someone
see
has produced one.
I thought they had.
Not well.
It's not a code level emulator. It's just a worker-like
A simulator.
Yeah.
simulator. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sure somebody has a simulator, but emulator requires the common code.
If it exists, it's probably on there in the HHC 2023 emulator directory, so we'll have a look at
Okay, we'll have a look
We'll
afterwards.
have a look, yeah.
Anyway, thanks everyone.
Thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
It's a really interesting talk for such rare machines.